Hi, good morning. Um, this is your serial cynic again. And as these thoughts go through my mind, um, I just go ahead and I just create a video for them. Hopefully these videos will become more professional the further along I go, with all the bells and whistles to make it more appealing to you. Right now, just sitting listening to me just talk, may be boring to some, but hopefully I can at least capture your interest with the topic. Maybe some things that you can go and research for yourself, or maybe it creates that desire to just go and find out more. Again, I've been on this thing where I've been drawn in and fascinated, and my attention has been captured by this whole Hebrew Israelite movement. Again, it's not something that I just recently found out about. I've known about them for years, but they've always been pretty much out there on the fringes. They've always been there, but just kind of like out there on the fringes. But more and more, they're becoming somewhat over into the mainstream and the mainstream consciousness. I've mentioned in another video, rappers like Kendrick Lamar, and I'm finding out about this guy by the name of Kodak Black, and there have been others in the past who either are part of the group or the movement, or they espouse their teachings, or at least some of them. Well, they're there. And today I'm going to talk about a topic regarding them again. But to prove the point about what I'm talking about in terms of how they're becoming mainstream, or they are influencing a lot of people. Some people may not come right out and wear it on their sleeves, or may not even be a part of the group, but they espouse their teachings. And I give you an example of what I'm referring to, and this is somewhat interesting. The other day I was trying to give my mom a call, and my mom lives in the Caribbean. So I was calling her number, but instead of going through my contacts and calling her number, I tried to dial the number off the top of my head. And somewhere along the line, I dialed the wrong number. I did not know at the time, but I dialed the wrong number. Anyway, the next morning, whosever number it belonged to called me back. And it was a male. And he called me back, and he said, "Hey, someone called me from this number. I'm just returning the call." You know, the usual. So I said, "Oh, it was me who called, but it was the wrong number." Obviously, the person spoke in my accent, from the Virgin Islands, and he could hear it in mine. So I said, "No, I was just trying to call my mom and just happened to call the wrong number." But I happened to look because I was trying to find out, just remember 2 major hurricanes passed through our islands last year. So I was trying to find out if there was an issue with my mom's phone or the service, because the service has been pretty sketchy and spotty. And I was really calling my mother to find out if her phone was working, because today it works, then 3 days in a row it's not working, and then another day it's working. So I happened to notice that the person I was speaking to also had the same service that my mom had. And I said, "By the way, let me ask you a question. I know I called the wrong number, but since I'm speaking to you, I just wanted to know, was your service working yesterday? Because I tried to call my mom and I didn't get her." And he said, "No, the service was working." So, of course, that worried me a bit. I'm trying to find out, is it just my mom's end of the island where the phone is not working? Is her phone not working at all? Or did something happen while she was not able to answer the phone? So he told me, no, the phone was working fine and whatever. So we didn't discuss where my mom lives, nor did I ask him where he lived on the island, but he just said this phone service is working. So somehow we drifted off into talking a little bit more about personal things and, hey, I live here in New York City and this is what's going on and I'm here with my children and so forth and so forth. And somewhere toward the end, well, I shouldn't say the end of the conversation, but I brought it to an end. Remember, this is a total stranger I'm talking to. And he asked me, hey, do you get into your roots? And I'm like, yeah, I look to see who my grandparents are, who my great-great-grandparents are. And because of social media and because of meeting other family members, I've been able to go back maybe as far as the middle 1800s to find out at least one side of my family. I want to say one side of my family. Of course, I believe that I have ties to Africa, that my ancestry in part comes from there. But the part that I was talking about in terms of knowing more about is a side of my family, both sides, my father and mother's side, that come from the island of Madeira, a Portuguese island, and how our foreparents came from the island of Madeira after the end of slavery in the British Empire in 1834, how they came over not long after as indentured servants. So I thought that's what he was talking about in regard to that. So I said, well, yeah, I do know, and I teach my children this and so forth. And he said, oh, that's good, because we black people are the people of the Bible. And immediately, considering what's been going on of late and the videos that I've been doing, immediately I realized where he was going with this. And he started saying, yeah, we black people are the children of Abraham. And, we need to live up to the laws of God. And this is when I pretty much brought the conversation to an end. I said, okay, I said, yeah, I try to teach my children, about their roots and everything along that line. He told me that's good. And we started going on. Obviously, this is a person influenced by the Black Hebrew Israelite theology, because the way he was talking and the little hints that he gave implied, this was not one of those like, yeah, you want to teach your children about God and you want to make sure that they know about God and everything. He was implying or stating that as a black man, it is my duty to live up to the things that I see in the Bible, and that we black people are the true children of God. So I just thought that was somewhat funny, but it just goes to point out, here's a random person on my home island that I'm talking to, and this is something that he brings up. So again, a lot more people believe it than you may know. And a lot, not everyone is going to wear it out on their sleeves or whatever, but it's a mentality that's going on. Am I knocking anyone for necessarily believing it? I want to say knocking, like going around and saying, you better not believe this or else. No, but I have my issues with it. And for the sake of conversation and debate, I don't agree with it, at least not everything that they say. But it brings me to this point, in which is what I wanted to talk about. And there's another point that I want to touch on. But what I really wanted to talk about is this. When it comes to the topic of slavery, there's been a narrative that has been passed on over the years. You hear it amongst some black people. You hear it amongst racists and people who, I guess, are white, or it's just been a narrative that's just been passed around. And the narrative is Africans sold their brothers into slavery to the white man. So what it comes over is it's like an excuse, like, why are you blaming us, white folks? It's your black people that sold us. I mean, it's your black people that sold themselves. It's your black folks that provided the slaves and everything along that line, or the enslaved Africans. So why are you blaming us? So while they can take some blame for engaging in the practice and for enslaving our ancestors and everything, it's almost like a little bit of an excuse they can use. Well, yeah, we were into it and all this kind of stuff, but hey, we're not taking full blame for it. Your people sold your people into slavery. You can go through YouTube right now and you can find where you have various people giving their opinions or giving their explanations to debunk such a theory. Now, do I believe that they were completely absolved of not having anything to do with it. And when I say they, I'm referring to Africans. I wouldn't say so. But I don't think it's the way that these people who put out this narrative try to convey it. Could I say that there were Africans who, through money, through coercion, or whatever the case might be, did not go out there and assist these white slavers in what they were trying to accomplish? I am sure. Just human nature. Money, hey, do this and I'll do this and whatever. Remember, some people just don't have a heart. Some people, they see that money. They see whatever is out there. They will sell their grandmother. But do I think that it was wholesale where entire tribes and empires were just going around like, hey, let's go ahead and do this? I don't really think that was something that actually happened. So that narrative has been passed out there that Africans sold Africans. So keep that in mind when you're trying to blame us white folks for slavery. This is one of the things that's going on. But the Hebrew Israelites, on the other hand, they come up with their own theory as to basically what happened. And in doing so, all it really does is continue to perpetrate this division between black folks on this side of the world, especially in the United States, and black folks out of Africa. While there are no riots in the street, there is no fighting, physical fighting and so forth between continental Africans, like here in a place like Harlem, and African Americans or Black Americans or whatever you may want to call them. Well, there's none of that going on. There's this latent tension between the two groups. And I mentioned it in my Black Panther video where I said that, the video seemed, not the video, well, in my Black Panther video, but the movie itself, where I mentioned the fact that it seemed like there was some shade dropped in the direction of African Americans. So there's this latent tension that goes on there between the two groups. But what is interesting is that the Black Hebrew Israelites take it to another level. And if you pay attention to what they teach, while a lot of their venom and everything is directed toward white folks and white Jews, as they call them, fake Jews, as they call them, while a lot of their venom goes that way, somewhere within their teaching, they have a way to explain this whole thing. Because now, when they put this theory over, it's their way of explaining why they are not to be mixed in and lumped in to the narrative that their ancestors sold or helped to sell Africans to the white man to enslave them. And the way they go about doing this is by saying, on the African continent, you could break down into tribes and groups and nations and so forth, but on a level, they try to say, or the explanation is that there are two groups of Africans, basically. And to differentiate, they go ahead and say, there are people born in Africa who are not descendants of the local population. They're saying that these are black folks who are really Hebrew Israelites, and the way that they call them Semites or Shemites, claiming that they descended from the youngest son of Noah after the flood, and that they are descendants of that son, Shem, whereby the local Africans or the native Africans are descendants of the other son whose name was Ham. According to their teachings, the Shemites, who the Israelites supposedly descended from Shem, when they were fleeing destruction of their civilization in ancient Israel, some of them fled into Africa into Egypt and those places. And then from there, some of them branched out and went westward towards West Africa and settled among the local African tribes who we will call the Hamitic Africans, because supposedly they descended from Ham. So by the time slavery came about, I guess you can also include the slave trade that the Arabs had, 600-700 years before the Europeans came on the scene, and European slavery. How they go about explaining it is that when these Europeans came looking to enslave Africans or to get sources of slaves from Africa, that the Hamitic Africans, the local Africans, the native Africans looked around and said, hey, those Hebrew Africans over there, let's grab them and give them to the white man so they can be enslaved. So in their teaching, the way that they'd put it over is those Hamitic Africans over there, they're the ones who are culpable for capturing our ancestors, our black ancestors, and selling them off to the white man. So you see how that works? Don't blame us. You see, we black folks, we black Hebrew Israelites, we weren't a part of that. We were the ones who were enslaved by the native Hamitic Africans. We were the ones that were enslaved, and our ancestors shipped over here. That is their narrative. That's the way they skirt around this issue. That's the way they get around it. So it's like, don't blame us. We're innocent. But what it does, it leaves it out there to basically say, you Africans, we don't trust you guys. And when I say Africans, I'm talking about continental Africans, supposedly Hamitic Africans. We don't trust you guys. We don't like you guys. You guys are the ones we're blaming. Now, they may not come out and say it that way, but it's left on the table for you to accept that. You're the ones we're blaming that our ancestors were dragged and brought over here. So it just continues to perpetrate the myth that there needs to be division amongst people of color. So when you see a black Hebrew Israelite walking around in Harlem, or you see him on a street corner, he distances himself from any association to do with an African walking by from Senegal, or from Congo, or from Zimbabwe, or from Nigeria, or Ghana, by saying, you are a Hamitic African. Your ancestors enslaved my ancestors, or fought against my ancestors, captured us, and sold us off to the white man. And that's basically what is left on the table, and for what you should take away from what they're trying to say. And again, all it does is continues to perpetrate the idea and the myth and the division that goes on with the two groups here in the United States. At least over here. I don't know how that goes in Europe and whatever the case might be. But that is something that's left out there. So just keep that in mind. The other thing that I wanted to talk about real quick, it's this. Black Hebrew Israelites, they're different in this regard. While you have black folks out there fighting for civil rights and have fought for civil rights and trying to appeal to governments to make changes to improve their conditions or to improve their lot, the black Hebrew Israelites are not going that route. Their route is more or less along the line of, we can be delivered from this lot that we're in, bottom of the rung, struggling, suffering. They believe that they're in that position because at this point, they believe that black Hebrew Israelites, which I guess would include me being on this side of the world, that we're cursed people because we forsook the ways of God, or Elohim as they would say. And in order to get back into his good graces and for us to rise out of the mess that we're in, they're not looking towards government. They're not looking to do this and they're not looking to do that. They believe the way out of this is to return back to the laws of God and following him the way that he said that in the Bible that he said we should follow him. So the belief is we're in this position because we forsook the ways of God. And of course, they go to the Bible and they go to a chapter like Deuteronomy chapter 28. And they say, see here, where it says the blessings and curses. If we did this and if we did that, he would bless us. And if we didn't do this and if we didn't do that, he would curse us. And they look at the fulfillment of this as looking at where the black man's condition is to this very day. Again, not including Hamitic Africans, just their group, the black Hebrew Israelites. And they believe we're in the situation we're in because we did not follow the ways of God. And why this is really interesting to me is this. Again, they are taking themselves and putting themselves into the scenario in the Bible and basically saying, those people you read about in the Bible, those are our ancestors. Those are our people. So they take themselves off the street of Harlem, Atlanta, Miami, and they drop themselves into the Bible and say, those people in there are us or our ancestors. Now, why this is really funny to me is because think of their logic or think of how they're thinking about this. We're in this position because we forsook God. Now, when you go to the book of Psalms, I don't remember the chapter, it might be 150 or 153 or somewhere is about. The ancient Jews found themselves in the same situation, asking the same questions and coming to the same conclusions. The chapter says, by the rivers of Babylon. Now again, this is after the Jews were exiled to Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar, who was king of Babylon. He invaded their kingdom, Judah, and he exiled the population. Not everyone, but he exiled a good chunk of people, and he took them to Babylon as exiles. Took them, conquered their kingdom, grabbed them, took the nobility, and took them to Babylon and exiled them there to serve the Babylonians. So when you read the psalm where the Jews are expressing this period, they say, by the rivers of Babylon where we sat down, and there we wept when we remember Zion or Jerusalem. And they're saying we can't even sing a joyful song. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? And it was during this time they came up with the same identical logic. They're looking around like, why are we here? Our God is the greatest. Our God is the best. What happened? And the answer was, you're here because you're in this situation. You're in this bad situation because you forsook your God. You did not follow his laws. You did not do what you were supposed to do. And that's why you're in the mess that you are in. And the only way you can get out of this mess is to return to the Lord. Return to his principles. Do what he told you to do. And he will restore you to your former glory. Think about what the black Israelites are saying today. They're saying the very same thing. So it's not new. Their logic is not new. Their thinking is not new. Their thought process is not new, as I've proven in some of my other videos. So think this over. And think over what I just said in this video. Okay? So I want to thank you for tuning in. Click on the subscribe button. Like the video. Share the video. Click on the little bell so you get notifications whenever there's a response to the video. And you can always feel free to go into the comment section, leave your comments there, your questions or your thoughts. Okay? Have yourself a good day. Think it over and get back to me.